Hello, and welcome to a very special four-part episode of the Mastering Fulfillment podcast. Through the last few years, Josh and I have dissected and looked at what are the areas of our life, our relationships that have either added or taken away areas of deep fulfillment in our life. Today, we really dive into the topic of freedom, and we truly believe that unless we have this inner sense of freedom, that we cannot be truly fulfilled. And so we really dive into a few different aspects of freedom, relationship freedom, financial freedom, and sexual freedom in this podcast. Thanks and enjoy.
Welcome to the Mastering Fulfillment podcast, where we focus on bridging your success with fulfillment in your personal, business, and spiritual life. And now your hosts, Scott Berry and Joshua Wenner.
Welcome back to the Mastering Fulfillment podcast. I'm Josh Wenner, and I'm here with Scott Berry. And today's focus is all about mastering freedom. You know, we've had Scott just recently went on an amazing trip, on a solo trip, and, you know, we got to talking afterward, and freedom can come in so many ways, whether you're constricted from feeling, maybe you're really busy working on a job and haven't had any time to really take freedom, and finding different ways to look at it, or maybe it's in different specific areas of your life where you're really wanting to say, how do I feel free, whether it's emotionally, financially. And so we started jiving about this topic and thought it'd be really fun to dive into it and to explore some different pieces around it. So today's focus, mastering freedom. So Scott, I know we were recently talking, and I thought it may be interesting to share what we were just kind of talking about. I loved your example of burnout. And sometimes with that, I like the turbocharge. We were just talking before we jumped on, and can you give that analogy? I love that analogy. I thought it was amazing. I thought that would be a really, and the reason being, if you're a high driver, if you're a workaholic, if you're pushing to the edge, there comes a point when you start to break down, and some of the things that you may be doing that feel like you're free to do your own projects, you push too hard and you burn out, and then you lose that sense of freedom. And so this is kind of where the conversation sparked from. But I loved your metaphor, and I think this will kind of give us a segue for what we're going to dive into today.
This whole idea of freedom, it's something that we've definitely touched upon many times on previous podcasts through bits and pieces of other episodes, but really looking at your life in a way, and this could be dissected, and like you said earlier, all these little different pieces of your life, it could be dissected in what does freedom mean as far as this expression of your passions, physical freedom. Do you feel free in your relationship? Do you feel free sexually? Do you feel free to speak your mind politically? Do you feel free in front of your friends? Do you feel physically free? I have some friends that have got into some pretty bad sports accidents and car accidents, and they, through either a loss of a limb or something, kind of traumatic, they've lost their freedom to maybe go skiing or do swimming or whatever it happens to be. So, freedom we're going to touch on a few different aspects of what freedom actually means, but at the core fundamental, it's this whole idea of, do you just feel free, and do you feel free to make the decisions through your own accord without feeling like there is, some type of pull or heavy influence on, outside society, these higher expectations of yourself, family who may be deceased or who may be with you. And so we were talking earlier, we were chatting right before the podcast, and, there's this idea of being driven. And I see this a lot in the Bay Area, especially in the tech culture. A lot of the big tech firms, the Amazons, the Apples, the Twitters, the Googles, all of these, the employees that are working there, they get financially compensated pretty well, but a lot of times you're really giving up a lot of your other time and freedom for work. Some people love it. It works for some people, and some people it doesn't. And so we were talking earlier about this whole idea of what does freedom mean, and how do we bring in these areas of our lives where we actually feel free to, spend time with family, to do these other pieces of our life, to travel and whatnot. And there are these times in our life where we know that we are going to be putting the blinders on. I have some really good friends that are going to school right now. It's a really condensed, almost like a boot camp for one's doing nursing school, and one's doing a coding academy, and that's all they can do because it's 12-hour days and they're studying day and night. So their freedom to do other things is foregone, at least for a little bit, at least for a year or two. And this whole analogy of basically turbocharging is we are able to basically put the blinders on, focus, and really push away other things for a certain amount of time, and really push ourselves, push our bodies, push our mental states to extremes done, right? If we've got a work deadline and we only have a week to do it, we'll coffee it up. We'll, push our adrenals down to, maybe putting our bodies in a little bit of an unhealthy state because we're not sleeping as much. But we're able to do that as long as we can compensate on the other side of, making up for it with sleep when we're done, and making up for it with, good nutrition and whatnot. But I think where we tend to get into trouble is, as humans, we can turbocharge ourselves in certain degrees, and in life that may be doing a 2-year boot camp, but it's when that turbocharging goes beyond, I guess, our healthy limits to, say we're going to, what I see a lot in the Bay Area too, especially in the startup community, there are people that sign on for this idea of a payout, startup stock options, and they have this idea that they're going to do it for 2 to 3 years, and they bust their ass, and you don't see them for a while, and that 3 years becomes 4 years, and that 4 years becomes 5 years, and then after a while, it's like the body sometimes can only put up so much, and then you start to deteriorate. So I think part of today is looking at all these aspects, but this whole idea of turbocharging and pushing ourselves. I mean, the body, the mind, the spirit is so resilient in so many ways, but when you start to push the boundaries too hard and too long, you start to come into chaos. And so I think today might be a really good opportunity to, kind of explore ways to keep ourselves in check when we are in those turbocharged modes. And I think it's a really special ability to be able to do that and to get shit done. And then I think there's also a really special ability to know where your limits are, to understand kind of where your healthy boundaries are, and then to honor those and adhere to those to make sure that you're not completely burning out. Because I think that's something that is a really big issue here in the Bay Area. And I'm mostly speaking from the Bay Area because I am in San Francisco right now, and it's just kind of what's very immediate in my field. And as I was talking with Josh earlier, and I don't know how much you want to get into your story, Josh, but Josh he's been very busy right now, and just getting time to do other things like this podcast and other things that he loves and travels has been, I guess, would you say it's been a little bit challenging?
Yeah, it's, I'd say it's not been a little challenging. It's just been non-existent.
Yeah. And what's been non-existent?
Well, I think it's the choices that I've made of what I've chosen to take on during this time period, as you mentioned earlier, just require so much attention that there's not a lot of extra space. So typically I have a lot of freedom to travel and to explore and to focus on other areas, but I've chosen to put that freedom into building and creating. So to me, taking a week to go to Hawaii or 2 weeks to go on vacation, where I may have had coaching clients and I was pretty relaxed in general, Now I don't have that same luxury because I'm in a turnaround with the company I took over. I've already turned it around, but we're on I got like a lot of pressure with that one. That's probably the primary driver, just because there's a lot of pressure and there's a lot of reward by turning it around. So there's that piece where I'm essentially running a whole company. I took over as president, CEO of a company, and I'm running it. And I had to learn the company, figure out what was wrong, turn it around, build new products, hire additional team members, and now scale it. So I'm doing it within the last 4 months, but I'm doing that, which in itself would have been extremely intense, in addition to launching my documentary and, men's retreats and, every other stuff that comes up. So to me, it's just been a lot of not having the space that I usually have in my freedom to balance. I've always been pretty much a workaholic and taken on a lot of projects, but for these ones, they're all time sensitive. And so usually I work really hard and then I balance by taking off. And that's typically been my balancer, is I work like crazy and I take 2.5 months off a year. I'll just take off for a week and kind of work like 25% of the time and recalibrate. And with this, I just haven't had the same time. So I think it's definitely taken a toll. And I've been definitely, depleting my adrenals and where I stopped working as efficiently at all on any of them, so that's been really my lesson, is paying attention to the body. When I burn down the adrenals like I have now, it's like, okay, stop, slow down, really chill out, start to nourish the body. And, what I experience is what's called the adrenal fatigue. And it's where the adrenals are like your fight or flight mechanism. And when you're pushing, they give you that extended, it's like drinking coffee. You get that extra extended energy and feel like you can do whatever, or caffeine. So imagine, and then you imagine you're a little tired and you do something where, for me, I might do push-ups or get inspired about an idea or drink some coffee or whatever it may be to get inspired to push through a moment where maybe you were a little tired. Well, it's fine, I think, as we talked about earlier, if you do it for a little stint here or there, or to finish an all-out project. But when it's happening again and again and again and again, kind of there's no end. At some point, the adrenals are like, dude, I'm tapped. And I noticed that, to me, the symptoms are, I get really tired. Like I wake up tired. I have to like push myself to go to the gym and to get up. And then even at the gym, I'll drink like a pre-workout. And then after I'm tired, can go to sleep. So I just start to notice I'm really kind of lethargic and tired throughout the day, almost trying to push through to get through each hour. And then at night, it's like I'm finally like, okay, I got all this stuff done, finally get home and go to sleep, and I can't sleep. So it's like you get home and the cortisol's streaming through your body. And so it keeps you awake. And so then it's like this. And so that pattern starts to repeat. And that's when it gets really tough, because then you're not sleeping very well. Your energy gets kind of just worn down, and then you're all tired during the day. So it becomes this crazy loop. And the way out of it is, one, to recognize it. Another good sign is, if you drink caffeine, it could be any type of caffeine, instead of getting like wired, you actually get tired. To me, that's another really good indicator that I burned out my adrenals, because I'll drink a little bit of caffeine because I'm tired, and then I get more tired. And I'm like, okay, something's wrong. And so the way back to it is really gentle. It's instead of the gym, it's walking or taking nice walks. It's eating a lot of greens, and they say protein in general for some reason, because it helps rebuild. Sleep is the biggest determinant. So finding things that are calming at night and can kind of calm my body. So I'm not as wired. And then some supplements, just some adrenal supplements that I find really make a difference. And then if I take it easy, it kind of regenerates and you get back down to normal. So, and I liked your example of the turbocharger. I thought that was such a good example.
So, it's interesting, because you're recognizing that you've been, a little bit on overdrive, and it's taken a toll a little bit, obviously, on the health aspect. And the body is such a beautiful feedback mechanism. I mean, the biofeedback that you get from the body is amazing. And so, now you have that, you can kind of course correct a little bit, because what you do know is that if you kept doing what you're doing, you'll burn out. I mean, you'll literally just crash and burn. I mean, in probably, I would guess, like a week or two, if not a month or two. You're pretty strong-willed. So in the whole context of freedom, I do believe that it is a beautiful skill for us to be able to really, put the blinders on and turbocharge. I do think that, half of these projects, things that are big accomplishments in my life and things that I have had to create have required that blinding and a little bit of sacrifice in freedom in some of the areas. And so, I'd love to get your perspective, because it's hard to push for 2 years in a row, 3 years in a row, even if that's what is called for. And the one thing that I know about you is that part of your process, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that part of your process, along with what I was doing, and this is very typical for entrepreneurs in general, is we're willing to put the hours in that other people aren't. We're willing to do the 60, 70 hour, 80 hour, 90 hour weeks in order to get the payoff of having our own schedule, to have flexibility, to have more freedom. So I think part of the why and the push and the overall momentum is this is ultimately what I'm trying to create. This is ultimately the type of freedom that I'm ultimately wanting to have, but I'm willing to sacrifice less freedom now for longer longevity of freedom in the long run. And so I don't know, maybe what your ultimate push, because it's really hard to do that on a day-to-day basis, because sometimes you forget, you got to wake up and it's like, well, you've got 3 things that need to be done and they're huge, and you've got 3 huge projects and you're juggling them all at the same time. And so it's like, how do you really keep the momentum? How do you keep yourself pushing, hopefully in a healthy way, through that whole period, that 2 months, 2 years, 3 years, or whatever it happens to be? I know for me, it's reminding myself of ultimately, like, I'm doing this for freedom, so I can give out more of my contributions to the world. And so I'd love to get your feedback on, what keeps you going? What's kind of your internal dialogue? What's your internal motivation to? I mean, you're like a Superman right now. I mean, and you've always been one to put yourself in the fire and be a little bit of a workaholic. But I mean, I've just been watching you, just kind of from the sidelines, and just been in awe and impressed about, how you can perform at such high levels for extended periods of time.
Thanks. I really appreciate it. And I'll make a comment earlier. What I find is I actually push until I do crash. So to me, what I'm experiencing now is the crash.
Is that your pattern?
Yeah, that's my pattern. Is I'll keep pushing. It's almost like, and I'm sure there's parts that aren't healthy, but I think it comes from the athlete in me, or something that's like, how do I find a way? And there's a part of me that does get addicted, in a sense, to the breakthrough. There's something that's fulfilling about, it's almost like a rush, I think, is part of it. It's like, how am I going to get this done? And that rush of not knowing how and finding a way to break through is part of the rush. And it can be super fulfilling for me to like I'll give you an example. 2 weeks ago, I've been figuring out how to turn around this company, Co-Founders Lab. And one of the things I did was like, let me try a webinar. So to me, I decided on a Wednesday and I booked the date on Tuesday. So I had 6 days to do it. So, in 6 days, I taught myself, I bought somebody's course, downloaded the course, had my VA kind of take the cliff notes from so I was able to accomplish, and working kind of around the clock on how to do it. But we had 270 people confirmed and 100 people showed up. And, I didn't know what I was doing from before it. And by the end of it, I sold 3 people from it. And then I did it again the following week and just sold another 10. So to me, it's like there's a rush of creating something out of nothing, I guess, is something that's a rush. And to answer your question, yeah, the ultimate goal is freedom. That's what is actually driving me, is on this Co-Founders Lab Rockstars opportunity. One, it's turning something around, and it's a sense of pride, I think, partially for me, is to feel a sense of pride that I can turn something around and scale it and grow it. And I do enjoy that process. And there's a large exit opportunity at the end of this this tunnel is really what's driving me to be done. And so I think that's why I'm willing to work so hard, is like, wow, I have the chance to be done on this one project. And on the other ones, the film is just something that I've been possessed by. I don't even know why. There's no real, you don't really make money from it. So documentaries don't make money. To me, it's been more, I think, my healing process and journey. Once I started interviewing people, I got obsessed with it. And now that we're creating something beautiful out of it, I think it's more about completion for me than anything, of like this thing that was so open and vague, and this journey. It's more about, can I just complete this thing and move on, and still do it beautifully, right? So I think that's, and to see the impact of what it can have. So I think that one's a little bit of a different motivator. It's not just freedom for me. It's more, well, I'd say it's multiple. One, it's also my legacy work. So because it's something purpose-based, I think I have more energy for it, because it feels like I'm learning, and I'm also positioning myself in the grief space as an authority. And I've learned so much from it. So it gives me a resource and a tool to reach out to people I may not normally be able to get a hold of, with something I'm bringing value with. So it's like, hey, I've created this film and I want to bring it into the world. How can I, and so people with like-minded interests. So I think that's the motivation for that, is it's like, it's a platform, it's a vehicle, it's something beautiful. It's something that I've learned a lot from and can help a lot of people, and it's my legacy. And I feel the same thing with the retreats. The retreats is like, it's just something, I feel like it's more from, I see the expression on people's faces and the results. And I think that's what drives. So I guess to answer your question, it feels like the Co-Founders Lab, that stuff's a little bit more for career-based financial freedom.
Mm-hmm. And more and growth too. I see the growth opportunities in you like stretching yourself, and like you scaling this business on a massive level in record time. I've seen you do that, and I see you get addicted to the growth, the internal growth of that process as well. And from my perspective is that a lot of what you're doing with the retreats and the documentary, that's all part of without a doubt part of your heart-based mission. And I would imagine that anytime you're pushing through and turbocharging, quote unquote, it's to ultimately get more freedom to do stuff like that. Yeah,
I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, that's when I was looking at it the other day, I was like, okay, let's say I have an exit and I'm done. What would I do? I would keep doing the same exact things I'm doing now with the film and the retreat. So I was on that path already to just start building those. And this opportunity came up. And I think also, to your same note, I think I have a larger vision of, I really do want to buy companies and turn them around and sell them. And,
totally.
So I think there's the growth aspect of it, the learning aspect of it. And I think so that maybe kind of tears it down, is like, can I jump in this and make this thing happen and prove to myself? I think the growth is self-proving, right? Do I believe in myself enough to turn this around? I think is what I'm experiencing.
Yeah.
It's like bad timing to do all of them, but the other ones, I couldn't stop doing the retreats, and the film was ready now. So it's like, I just had to do all of them. Or typically I think doing this many would be too much personally. Like in the future, I don't think either I'd have teams driving all these and less pressure. Because it really has taken a toll. Like I don't have a lot of time for a lot of other things. And so if I had to wave a magic wand, I wouldn't be taking on all these projects in the future, But I think you're right. I think what's driving me is the growth, the potential of freedom. I'm also learning a lot about building a team, and the chance to work with a couple of my mentors really closely and to see how they do things has been super fulfilling on a growth level. So yeah, man, I think I think freedom is the overall message that's driving me from all of them. At the core, freedom and growth, contribution. But it definitely doesn't feel free. Is the irony with it, because I'm so committed to these. And there's a couple year probably time span within them, So I think that's the tricky thing about freedom, is like, here we go after freedom, but some of the things that actually set us the most free don't give us freedom while we're creating them, As we're building them, that is where our focus goes. Because in order to truly be free, I feel like it takes dedication and focus and really focused energy.
Yeah.
to create something of value and to build something,
Yeah, absolutely.
And during that time, it doesn't feel as free because I'm not just running around and, doing what I want. I have the freedom to do the things that I'm creating, but I don't have the same freedom, And it seems like, it's like what you did when you built your business years ago. Those first couple of years, you didn't have a lot of freedom.
Oh yeah, I had none.
And it was building it up, getting it set up, learning everything, getting it where it needs to be. And now years later, as it runs, you're still looking at how to scale it, but you've been able to set up your life in a different way. And I think that's partially because it's your business, yours, right?
Yeah.
You built it.
Yeah.
You have this vehicle now for freedom, and you can run your life very much more like you're enjoying your retirement now, not just later on down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a really good segue to diving a little bit deeper into financial freedom.
If you enjoyed this show, we would be so grateful if you left a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. This helps us out immensely. Thank you so much. Are you ready to take your personal, relational, or business fulfillment to the next level? With one-on-one personal support, co-developed strategies, and accountability, Scott and Joshua have the tools, compassion, and years of experience helping people just like you live an extraordinary life. Visit masteringfulfillment.com for details.